Welcome to the Boneyard with Steve Robertson. As always, I am your good friend and host, Steve Robertson, here on Christmas Eve. Wishing you and your family the absolute best. Salutations from the Bulldog Nation to the Bulldog Nation. I don't know how long we go tonight. I'm just going to kind of pitch it out here. We got a few things to update, of course. And, we won't do a top 10 list tonight. We'll just kind of get through it. I'll give you guys a few things kind of here and there. And, we're going to shut it down, spend a little time with the bride. And a lot of people say, Steve, take some time off. That's not the profession in which I'm in. It's like all those years when Dana worked at the hospital, our kids were a little bit older. We didn't have the Christmas morning reveal, that kind of stuff. And so more times than not, she would work, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So the younger mothers with younger children could have those special memories. It was important to us, to give. And part of my giving is to take care of you all. And so, no, I don't take a lot of time off. I love what I do. And it's been, it's a regular day for me. Our kids are going to be here next week. It was important for us, for our grandgirls, to have, Christmas Day at their house. We wanted them to have the opportunity for Santa Claus to come see them at their place. And so we planned a family get-together next week. And, won't take much time off then, but I will take off some. But, I commit to doing 3 shows a week. We're going to give you 3 shows a week. Simple as that. And it's been a busy day. Got up this morning, punched up a couple stories for you guys. How the junior college ruling or injunction kind of impacts Mississippi State as the NCAA has now granted a 1-year waiver to players that, in a similar situation as Diego Pavila from Vanderbilt. I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. And then, of course, kind of what's next for Mississippi State. I wanted to kind of prepare you guys for some pending commitments, one of which is now in. And then also, too, I went down to Bookmartin Cafe downtown. Just kind of decided that yesterday. I was like, you know what? There may be some Bulldogs out there. They want to get a copy of the dude for Christmas. And I want to be there to personalize those books. So went down, had a great day with Miss Carolyn Abadi at Bookmartin Cafe. Came home, and I'm thinking, hey, let's punch out some content. We get a commitment. We were expecting it tomorrow, but it came today. It's a Festivus miracle for Mississippi State. And I thought, you know what, I promised you guys a Christmas Day show, so we're going to get it done this evening. And I'm going to spend some time tomorrow just kind of hanging with the wife. And I'm sure I'll punch up some content because that's just kind of who I am, And I know many of you, in between opening gifts and having dinner and things like that, you'll be looking at your phone, be looking for some things to read. And it is a responsibility that I and my team take very seriously. Now, I have instructed the team not to feel obligated to produce content on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. I said, hey, if you want to do something, great, but don't feel obligated to do it. Your situation is much different than mine. I'm an empty nester, but we are going to go eat some Chinese food tomorrow. And we're going to go watch Christmas movies with the Starkville kids and give them their gifts. And we're going to have a good time. But reality of it is that, I work in an industry that is very demanding. And I didn't choose the grind. The grind chose me, as some hip-hop poet said some time ago. But I do. I love what we do. I love being able to do this show for all of you. But the most important thing that I'm going to say tonight is no matter what holiday you celebrate, we celebrate Christmas in our house, but I respect the fact that everybody's got their own beliefs about things, and some people don't celebrate, the December holidays. So whether you do or you don't, or you celebrate Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or anything like that, I hope that you have some time with your family and you make some memories that you will never forget. Speaking of that, I love watching the reels. I've told you guys that before, and there was a reel that popped up. Grandma was opening a gift, and the box was kind of moving. She opens it up, and all the kids are gathered around. And some redneck had wrapped up a possum, a live possum. And then the kids are traumatized, and somebody goes and grabs the possum by his tail. They're leading him around. It's all some big joke. I began to think to myself, what are you doing? You bring in a possum. What if the possum would have attacked one of the children? I mean, you bring in a possum in. He's disoriented. He's irritated. And she opens it up. She turns the box over, and the possum just kind of takes off. And everybody, and some of the adults are laughing. I think to myself, that's child abuse, man. Can't do that. And I got some rednecks in my family, too, that may just try that. So let me encourage you, do not do that. Do not take a wild animal and wrap them up in a box just for clicks on social media. There we go. A little Christmas tip for you. Let's thank our friends at Bulldog Burger Company, longtime sponsors of this show. I love Bulldog Burger Company. I love going in there and putting my feet under their table and just letting them take care of everything. That's the important part of it, right? I like to get waited on, right? And I love being able to just kind of take a load off, not have to worry about the cooking, worry about the shopping, anything like that. I can just go in there and get a great meal at a great price, great service, and a great atmosphere. 3 great locations to serve you: University Drive in Stark Vegas, Gloucester Street there in Tupelo, Lake Harbor Drive in the Ridge and Flowood area. Have the spring rolls as your appetizer, and then prepare to have a great restaurant quality hamburger of your choosing. If you're new to Bulldog Burger Company, let me recommend the Bulldog itself. It's a good straight ahead rock and roll American hamburger. If you want to eat a little bit lighter, you can get the BLT salad, but it's a huge salad. It really is. Huge salad. I prefer it grilled. You may like it fried. It's up to you. Mine is always doused in ranch dressing. I'm from South Mississippi. It's a requirement for us. But no matter what you have a hankering for, you can get it cured at Bulldog Burger Company. The place where people go to meet. M-E-A-T. Okay. Mississippi State picks up the commitment of Fluff Bothwell. Fluff Bothwell. That's a very significant commitment for a lot of reasons. Fluff is a dude, man. And, this is a guy that early in the season, some people were like, this guy is outstanding. If we can get him, we need to get him. And we do. We're thinking, hey, if he goes in the portal, he would be a great fit for us. Guys, he was an SEC back, just kind of playing in a G5 conference, Guys, he had 832 yards and 13 touchdowns on 111 carries this year. He has 3 seasons of eligibility remaining, and pretty significant commitment. Hugely significant commitment. And I want to give you a little background here, too. I shared some of this with our Genes paid subscribers. But, guys, it was never going to be Ole Miss, ever. Now, I know some people are out there trying to suggest otherwise. And here's the thing I'll tell you. When I don't have a good read on something, I will just tell you. I'm not going to tell you just what you want to hear or write what you want to hear. I'm just going to tell you there'll be some guys that will pop up in the next recruiting cycle, and I'll tell you, hey, that kid's probably headed to Ole Miss or probably heading out of state. Sometimes you don't have a good read on. On this one, I did. And you found out pretty early that you're talking to the right people. And that's the most important part of my job, is having sources that you know and trust. And sometimes new sources come along. And sometimes they give you information that's credible, and other times they don't. You have to sort through that yourself. You can't just rely on one source, ever. That's how you get beat on stuff. And with Fluff's commitment, that's 22 consecutive crystal ball picks correct in a row for me. Got a couple more hanging out there I feel great about. I got one that I'm a little on the fence about. We're going to talk about that too. But when you think about Fluff and what he brings to the table at Mississippi State, how many times this year in short yardage did we just not have a guy that could move the pile? Well, more times than you can count. Kevon Lee, at times when he was healthy, was able to do that because he's a guy that falls forward. Fluff is a guy that is very eerily reminiscent of Josh Robinson, a little bit bigger than Josh, and I mean a little taller. But he is that squatty, powerful back with a great lower half, as they say. A guy that really can kind of churn, keep those feet moving, and push the pile forward. We have really lacked that. We needed a feature back, and you say, you know what, Steve, Davin Booth did really good down the stretch, and he did, but it took him about half a year to figure that out. We're going to talk about him a little bit more in the next segment of the show. But, Fluff is a guy that matters. He's also one of the highest-rated portal players in the portal for 247 Sports. And what's interesting to me about that is this is a guy that proved it. We talked about, hey, it's going to be either Wayman Jordan, That's a running back from Hutchinson, or Fluff. We thought, hey, we would get one of those two, and we may split them with Ole Miss. We'd get one, they'd get one. There were times it felt like Jordan would be the guy, and people asked me on the board, Steve, who would you prefer? I said, I'm going to be good either way, because I think both of these guys bring an element that we don't have. But I kind of preferred Fluff because he's already played Division I football. And I thought, we don't want to get in a situation kind of like we were last year with Booth, where it took him kind of half a year to get going. And Wayman Jordan is an explosive back that committed to Central Florida and didn't sign because of the coaching change. And I thought, what if we get him and it takes him half a year to figure this thing out? And the good thing is he has 2 years of eligibility. The bad thing is what we're learning is many of these guys are just kind of rent a player for a year. If you bring Jordan in and he has a good year, especially in the second half, and all of a sudden you're going to have to pay even more to keep him for year number 2. Fluff's kind of in a similar situation, but he has 3 years to work with. But my thing about that is this guy is more SEC ready. This guy already knows a little bit about how to work to be a college football player. That's an important aspect of it to me, is what did Fluff Bothwell do as a freshman? He ends up being one of the best freshman running backs in the country this year. And really a guy, too, that was probably a little bit undervalued coming out of high school. Kind of looking at some of his bigger games here. Against FCS Northwestern State, 7 carries for 143 yards, a pair of touchdowns, along of 57. He goes to App State and gets $116 and a couple touchdowns there. Against Louisiana Monroe, which was a better team this year, 119 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then against Southern Miss, he runs for 104 yards. So 834 yards on 112 carries. I think I said 111 earlier. Also, caught a couple passes out of backfield, too. That's probably a part of his game that we need to round off a little bit. But this South Alabama team, wasn't a great team. They were a good team. They weren't great. They go 7-6, and they win the Western Michigan, win the IS4S Salute to Veterans Bowl over Western Michigan back on December the 14th. To finish up with a winning record this year. But, a good team, not a great team. But you go back and you begin to look, at some of the teams they played against. So against his contemporaries, he was really good. And of course, going to App State and winning in Boone, that's significant. He also played against LSU. And, South Al, again, just doesn't have the horses to compete with a team like LSU. But, you kind of look up here. And, he had 10 carries for just 17 yards when it's all said and done. And against that front, that offensive line, probably not significant. Gio Lopez actually had a pretty good game for them. But, one long run of 33 yards. And then Kentrell Bullock, remember him? From Columbia, Mississippi, went to Ole Miss. He's down at South Al, too. He had 9 carries for 56 yards. And 21 of that came on one carry. So this is a guy that, again, knows what it takes to prepare, understands the demands of the offseason conditioning program. This is a guy that I think makes us a better football team. I don't think there's any question about it. He makes us a better team. There is reason to be excited. And I think that's one of the things. There are a lot of people that have kind of like, Steve, I kind of like what we've done, but we haven't really found the difference maker. We found some good players that may develop. I think that those linebackers are going to be good, and I think our commitment to the defensive line is going to be certainly better than last year. We're going to be a lot bigger across the front. But when you go out and you get Luke Kromenhoek as a quarterback, and then now you go add Fluff, I think you put yourselves in a situation where there's a young nucleus of offensive players you can now build around. And Fluff is a guy that I think, it'll take him a game or two to kind of figure some things out. But the reality of it is, I think he is a guy that is better equipped to hit the ground running over a junior college back. No matter how explosive they were in the junior college ranks, there is going to be a learning curve. We even saw it with Pernell McPhee. We saw it with Montez Sweat. Those guys are pros and have played multiple years in the NFL. And it took them kind of a half a year to kind of figure this thing out. And that's just playing defense. Playing offense is a little more complicated. So you're going to take a guy that has kind of gotten by on athleticism and put him into a program in an offense that's going to require really a lot more know-how. And I think the learning curve is much bigger. on offense. That's just my personal opinion. You may see it differently. But I think that this was the better result for Mississippi State. And, again, you beat Ole Miss head-to-head. And I think that's the 4th time in this portal class that we've done that. I think that's correct. You beat Kobe Keenum. He comes here. We beat Ole Miss for Kobe Keenum. He visits here and then goes to visit Ole Miss. And people are like, well, that's it. He's gone. Well, he ends up committing to Mississippi State. Same thing with Fluff. Visits State, then goes to Ole Miss. Some of our fans freak out. Guess what? He ends up coming here. And, of course, Darian Gallett's another guy that Ole Miss was on heavily, and we end up getting him too. So I say all that to say this. The normal rules don't apply. Last year, like if a guy didn't commit on a visit, it was like 90% he wasn't coming here. Jacoby Jackson was kind of the exception. This year it's been much different because of the fact the rev share, the NIL, that's a bigger part of things. Guys are willing to shop around a little bit more. And again, another guy that we get that had multiple Power 5 offers as we kind of move forward. So great get for Mississippi State. Very excited about it. Next segment of the show brought to you by closewithblair.com. That's Blair Chandler, my friend, your friend, our collective friend in the mortgage industry. Blair's number, 601-500-2344. Again, 601-500-2344. 24 years of experience. Get that know-how working for you. Whether you're looking for your first home, your next home, or your retirement home, Blair is the name to know. Recently made the move to Priority One Mortgage. The same level of service went with him. One of the top closers in the country, thus the name closewithblair.com. Blair's also a Bulldog. I like to keep business in the family whenever we can. I think we should support each other. Blair is a season ticket holder in multiple sports. It's a place here in Starkville, and is a guy that I trust. And I think you should too. And so take a lot of the guesswork out of this. It's a very complicated process. Put somebody that knows the ins and outs of the underwriting process. He knows how to structure loans to give you the best chance of approval. That's closewithblair.com. All right, Steve, so what could be next for Mississippi State? And I wrote up some bones a little bit earlier. And also, too, I had a little piece, a free piece earlier today about kind of what's next for Mississippi State. And so, kind of looking at that, the name that I expect to jump in the boat next for Mississippi State is Rashawn Thomas. That's a defensive lineman out of northern Illinois. And a lot of people are like, Steve, are we just going to offer all these guys from northern Illinois? Well, if it helps us, if that's what we're going to do, that's fine with me. So Rashawn Thomas, that's how it's spelled Rashean, pronounced Rashawn. In 2023, he had a great year. And, of course, he played in 2020. That year didn't count. And then in 2021, 48 tackles. In 2022, 44 tackles. In 2023, he really comes into his own. 74 tackles, a pass defended, and a couple sacks. Now, this year, only 12 tackles. And so some people only go look at the more recent stats and say, Steve, what's the deal here? Guys, he broke his foot. He broke his foot, missed some time, came back, wanted to play, and because of the fact he had the injury, he said, you know what, hey, maybe I'll just play 4 games, take the red shirt, and then go in the portal and see if I can't land with a Power 4 program. So he has. And so I wanted to provide some context there because, again, this is a guy that was, number one, he's a defensive lineman with 75 tackles. What would we have given for that this year, right? And so, again, you look at last year's numbers and you think, hey, well, something's not right. Well, what's right is that he wasn't healthy. And he got a little bit heavy, because he couldn't run or anything like that on a broken foot. And so he's got to get in football shape, and he'll be good to go. He came back out even though he wasn't 100%, tried to help the team as best he could. But it's interesting to me. This guy's listed at 6'4", 262. I'm told that he's bigger than that. He tells me that he can play a 3-tack. He could even play 4-eye and certainly a 5-tack. So he is a guy with some flex, and that's a big, big thing this year. When you're looking to rebuild this defensive line, you need to get guys that maybe aren't pigeonholed. We'd love to have a true nose guard, certainly. But look for Rashawn Thomas to be a Bulldog sooner rather than later. And, of course, that would be another defensive end, another defensive lineman for you. And, again, really probably closer to a Jaden Crumedy type. I think that's probably the best player comparison that I could make. But, you kind of look at this. You get Malik Sela, a long, rangy edge, 6'6", 245, with a wingspan that is absolutely ridiculous. You add Jure Bledsoe, a 6'4", 290-pounder, a guy who was heavily recruited out of high school. That's going to be an interior guy. He's not an edge guy. This is a guy that's going to play on the interior. And Nevaeh Sanders, certainly an edge, probably more of a 7-tech. Red Hibbler, 6'2", 271. Another guy that's probably a 5, could play a 4-eye. And at 270, you got to think you might be able to put 10, 15 good pounds of muscle on him and have him play in a 4-point stance. We'll see how things kind of play out with him. But, we're not done by any stretch of the imagination. Even with 15 portal commitments in, we're still probably expecting about a half dozen. Now, Will Woodson's a guy that we've talked about too. Now, on Sunday, I felt great about him. I still feel pretty good. I don't feel great, but I feel pretty good. And Cincinnati, his hometown school, has kind of made a push here as of late. They're trying to get him to stay home, and he's a guy, too, that could be an interior guy, and I think a difference maker for us. He's 6'5", 285. And if you see him, this guy is absolutely yoked up. Again, there were a lot of people that thought he would get drafted this year. He gets hurt, just plays the 4 games, takes a red shirt, now looking to kind of move on and play a bigger brand of football, see if he can improve his draft stock. Latest information from his agency is Mississippi State is still the leader, but Cincinnati has given him some things to think about. And people are like, well, come on, it's Cincinnati. It's your hometown school. That matters. Geography always tends to matter. So we'll see kind of how things go. But again, State still the leader, but it's not as clear-cut as it was even 48 hours ago. A name that has emerged, too, is Deron Reed Jr. They call him DJ out of Auburn, a guy that hadn't done a whole lot, during his career at Auburn. He was a guy, too, that was pretty highly recruited out of Carver High School in Columbus, Georgia. If you're familiar with Carver, that's, we've had some success there over the years. But this is a guy that had nearly 20 offers, and they were all big-time offers, too. Auburn, Ohio State, Miami, LSU, Clemson, many, many others. And so highly recruited guy, but the production, it just hadn't come together yet for him. And, he was a member of the class of 2023, so it's not like that he is a guy that's just kind of languished over there on the bench, just kind of waiting to figure this thing out. But I think some of this, too, sometimes a change in scenery is good for these guys. You remember Mekhi Polk was a guy, too, that was kind of underutilized during his time at Cal, comes to Mississippi State and sets a school record. And, of course, he was kind of a product of the system. But, that could be the case for Reed, too. Just hadn't played much. Just doesn't have much snap. And he was a freshman this year, 6'4", 285 guy. Again, another guy that could play on the interior. A guy that I think could do some pretty significant things for us. But been in the portal about a week. Kind of see how things move ahead with him. But it could be a scenario that we only get 2 of those 3. I'd like to take all 3 of them. And I believe Mississippi State would take all 3 of them. As a true freshman, Reed played in the Music City Bowl and then took that year as a redshirt. And then this year, he played in a couple of games as a reserve. So, not an atypical, path, for a young defensive lineman. But a guy certainly, he's not going to wow you with his statistics. And so you're taking this guy basically on a size and potential standpoint. One of the things that jumps out to me when I look at this group and I start thinking about what we played with last year, and all due respect to everybody involved, but again, Malik Sela, 6'6", Jure Bledsoe, 6'4". Let's see here. Nevaeh Sanders, 6'4". Red Hibbler, 6'2", 6'2.5". And then all of a sudden you start, adding these other guys. You feel awfully good about them. Darren Reed, 6'3". Also involved with McKees Grace, who went in the portal today. Probably going to have to beat Ohio State from him. He's a Cincinnati, Ohio native, but he also has a connection to Diego Brumfield. That could help us. Will Woodson is 6'5". Rasheem Thomas, 6'4". So we could be 6'4" across the board or bigger. And even you go back and you look at Jamarcus Moy and Mason Clinton, and we told you guys those guys were going to be depth pieces. And a lot of people kind of pan those commitments. You're like, hey, Steve, come on. we really expect these JUCO guys to come in here and turn this defense around? No, we expect them to be rotation pieces, but you begin to think about the metrics in which we're chasing now and the measurements with these players. We needed to get bigger. We needed to get stronger. We're doing that. I'd still love to find a true nose. Jamarcus Moy could be, but I think you're asking an awful lot, for a guy that you're coming up from the JUCO ranks to go out there. Really, you just need a guy to go out there and occupy a double team and just hold his ground and open up things for those backers. And that, let's be honest about that too. I mean, with Stone Blanton and Isaac Smith making all those tackles, I really don't want them to have to make those many tackles because I want to be able to stop guys at the line of scrimmage. And again, you look at so many of these games that we lost, we could not stop the run. And a lot of that just because the size differential didn't favor us. We're addressing that, and I think the staff is to be commended for that. You're going out, you're getting some guys that are highly recruited for the most part, either highly productive G5 guys or very talented Power 4 guys that maybe haven't had a full opportunity yet. And so it's an interesting formula. People are like, I wish we'd go out there and get these highly accomplished Power 5 guys. Well, there's not many of them in a defensive line. And not to mention, everybody else wants those guys too. So we got to be smart in what we do. I think we're doing well. And I think the Fluff commitment is really a signal to Mississippi State fans that, hey, these guys had a plan. These guys are executing the plan. And now you look up and you got 15 commitments before Christmas, just 2 weeks and 1 day into the portal season. And now, again, you've got about a month to figure this thing out. And looking at these, kind of what's left for Mississippi State, when you start thinking about what do we need to prioritize, in the days leading up to the dead period ending on January 5th. I mean, of course, you can get commitments. I mean, the kids don't have to visit to commit. Brendan Thompson did that from Oklahoma. He just jumped at Jeff Levy. You've got to be able to go get get a corner or two. And there's some interesting names that are out there that are already in the portal, like Josh Moten. And I'm beginning to feel a little bit optimistic about that, not even close to being able to call it. But there's some other names, too, of intrigue that may be going in soon. You got 4 more days to enter the portal, so we're watching that closely. So you got to get a corner, maybe 2. And I really believe I think we're on the defensive lineman that we want. Of course, if McKees wants to come, he's too good. McKees Grace from South Dakota, if he wants to go, you got to take him. But I think it's situation 2 with him being from Cincinnati. Ohio State is absolutely a factor in his decision. But I think for the most part, on defense, if these defensive linemen come through, I think everything else would be a bonus. I don't know if you take another backer unless there's just a guy that's just too good to pass on. I think the same thing for safety. I think we feel good at safety, but you have to get at least 1 corner to replace Bryce Polak, and again, maybe 2, because competition is good for everybody. On the offensive side of the football, we still need a tackle. We talked about we got to get a center, we got to get a guard, got to get on a tackle. I like the pieces that we've taken, but I feel good about having Albert Reese and Luke Work back. But I think, again, you got to go get a tackle out there, and we'll kind of monitor and see how things go. And if you haven't read that, the story that I did with Carson Lee, it's a free story. You should. Great young man. But then you got to get a couple wide receivers. And you start thinking, okay, that's one of the things, like, Jeff Levy and Bump did a great job last year getting wide receivers. And you begin to think, okay, we're going to be throwing the football around, and we've proven that we can increase your production. I mean, Kevin Coleman had the biggest year of his career, tripled his production from Louisville here at Mississippi State. So, again, I think you got to get at least 2 receivers. You feel good about the back. So, again, you start looking at the pieces on offense, maybe a tackle, and then a couple wide receivers, right? So the 3 more pieces on offense. Again, you feel like 2 or maybe 3 of these defensive linemen are coming. And then you think about a couple corners. And so you do the math on that, and you can see, hey, we're probably talking about 6 to 8 more guys. And so you look up and say, hey, Steve, we're at 15 right now. And we expect this class to settle somewhere in the low 20s. Levy said 15 on signing day. We were expecting 20 to low 20s even before he said that. And I was thinking, that's weird, But again, I think probably 21, 22 when it's all said and done. So we've broken a lot of news, but there's still some news to come here in the next month. All right, so next segment of the show brought to you by Campus Bookmart, a Starkvillian institute. We love Campus Bookmart. You should too. If you're looking for Mississippi State merchandise, look no further. Miss Kathy Brown and everybody involved with Campus Bookmart knows what maroon looks like. You don't want to order something online, have your kids walking around in a crimson shirt that says Mississippi State on the front, only to have them bullied and picked on because some buyer out there didn't know what maroon looked like. You don't want that. And also, too, the diploma frame, right? It's a great gift, especially for those Bulldogs that are going to have an office job and have that diploma up in the home or in their office, and they'll always think of you when they see it. But every knick-knack you could possibly get and think about is available to you at Campus Bookmart. If you can't make it to town to see their smiling faces, visit them on the World Wide Web at campusbookmart.net. And by being a loyal Boneyard listener, we'll give you a phrase that pays, and that is BSR, which stands for Beautiful Steve Robertson. That gets you free shipping on all orders over $75. Any order less than $75, absolutely incomplete. All right, teased it a little bit in the early part of the show. What does this junior college ruling do for us? I went through the roster this morning, looked at all of our seniors that were kind of similarly situated with Diego and Vandy. Now, he began his career at New Mexico Military Institute. It's a junior college. It's outside of the purview of the NCAA. Now, the NCAA has set these eligibility rules in place years ago, and it's always been an accepted practice that if you played anywhere outside of a prep school after your high school career was over, that those years counted against your 4 years of eligibility. Well, Diego and his law team is like, hey, we're going to go ahead and challenge this, because how can the NCAA mandate this when these players are playing inside an organization that is beyond their purview? It's an interesting question. Is it the right thing for college football? I would say probably not. You're going to have even less opportunities for high school players, right? And then you're going to have some guys potentially, getting waivers. You may have guys playing into their mid-20s. Goodness gracious, there's a lot to that. But nevertheless, the two players that meet the identical criteria, because the NCAA came out on Monday and said, hey, we're just going to issue a blanket waiver to everybody who maybe began their career in junior college and that 2024 was their last year of eligibility. So rather than tie this thing up and have all these other lawsuits filed that can get very expensive, we're just going to go ahead and get ahead of the game and say, okay, everybody involved now, since we've granted this waiver to him because of this injunction, we're just going to go ahead and say everybody that was a senior that began the career in junior college that should be out of eligibility will be given another year. Just go ahead and get ahead of that. Because the injunction, the federal judge in Tennessee is like, hey, you guys are not going to tie this thing up and keep him off the football field. If you're thinking about doing that, I'm going to go ahead and declare him eligible right now. And that'll kind of force them to get this lawsuit done, right? There'll be a ruling eventually. But I think it's actually pretty smart on behalf of the NCAA to say, hey, let's just go ahead and do this before Tom Mars and everybody else involved, and we have lawsuits in all 50 states. So there are hundreds of players that are impacted by this. Not all of them will stay at their current schools. We're already beginning to see that. Florida State had a young man yesterday just kind of go ahead and make a preemptive jump. He goes, okay, they're going to give me another year. Let me go ahead and jump in the portal. I'm getting out of Florida State. So, again, the two players that are impacted for us are Kelly Akari and Davin Booth. Now, Kelly, but just like Diego, began his career at Tyler Junior College. The same year and everything. Played 2 years and then transferred to UTEP. Diego played 2 years at New Mexico Institute and then transferred to New Mexico State and then elected to use his final year of eligibility at Vanderbilt. And so it is a mirrored situation. So absolutely, Akari, because of this blanket waiver, has another year of eligibility. Now, he sends out yesterday on social media, picture of him in the dog walk and all jacked up and ready to go. Davin Booth was a guy, too, that was tweeting out on social media kind of decisions. And based on what I'm hearing, many of these players that were affected by this had already been contacted by legal representation. It's like, hey, we're going to go file lawsuits on your behalf if you're involved. I believe that was a big part of the teasing, right? It's like we didn't even know what the waiver was going to look like, but since the precedent had been set, there were a lot of enterprising lawyers out there that were like, hey, this is a chance for us to pick up some clients. So again, smart move by the NCAA to kind of sidestep some of that litigation. But now here we are. And so I reach out to some Mississippi State officials and I find out, hey, we had already been looking into this kind of in advance. If this thing went this way, if he was granted an injunction, could we be in a position to have our players get a legal ruling, that would be beneficial to them too. And there's no guarantee you get the same ruling in another state. You could make the argument, but again, until a judge rules on it, you never know. They may see the law differently. But now that prospect has been removed, there's no need to go file the lawsuit. Well, now all of a sudden, now it's just basically applying for the waiver that you know is going to be granted. And Davin Booth, of course, coming back, and we talked about how he really picked it up, down the stretch. It was one of those things where Davin Booth, again, early on, I even questioned his vision. I'm like, this guy's like running at the backside of linemen. It took him a while to kind of acclimate to the speed of the game. But down the stretch, man, he was absolutely outstanding. Absolutely great. And ran hard against some very, very difficult teams. And, I go back here and you start looking, okay, first game of the year, 39 yards, then 7 yards, then 12 yards. And then against Florida, we really get it going. 75 yards for him. And then we go to Texas against a team that everybody said we couldn't run against, and he ran 59 yards. Georgia, not quite as good, but 32 yards there. And then down the stretch there, again, he really, really picked it up. A&M, 79 yards. Arkansas, 93 yards. And, of course, that game got away from us a little bit, too, so we kind of had to abandon the run a little bit. That would have easily been a 100-yard game for him. UMass, 76 yards. And then 125 yards at Tennessee. 124 yards against Missouri. And then just 38 against Ole Miss. And I give Ole Miss some credit, too. But your game plan was a little bit different, but there just wasn't quite as much room to run. So give them credit. Ole Miss is a tough team to run against. But 759 yards. Not to mention what he did, out there as a receiver, too, 164 yards. And he was the guy, too, paired up with linebacker in space. More times than not, he's going to make that first guy miss. But now you start thinking, okay, I can add this guy back to my roster. And not to mention, this is a personnel group that Jeff Lebby had really talked about from the beginning of spring, that the room had to get better. We kind of made do with what we had. You lose Jeff Pittman before the season starts. Then you lose Kevon Lee. And I'll be honest with you, when they said he was RB1, I think that was really more of an indictment on the entire unit, because I just didn't think Kevon was ever going to be a featured back for us. And I'm just kind of calling it as I see it. I think he adds value to the team, but I don't think that he is a guy that was going to, be a 1,000-yard rusher or anything like that. But now you start looking at Kelly Akari. Remember, Kelly was a guy too. He was banged up beginning of the year, and so you start thinking about that aspect of it. It's like, hey, what if we get a healthy Kelly Akari back who's already had a year to kind of acclimate to the SEC? Played in 11 games, but he was somewhat limited early on. 25 catches, which was third on the team. 25 catches, 391 yards, a couple touchdowns. So if you add him back, then that's one less receiver you got to go take out of the portal. That would be a big benefit. And so when you start thinking about building some enthusiasm around this team, building some momentum, trying to sell some tickets, trying to get the fans back on board, trying to get fans to buy in, I think this is a step in the right direction. Now, of course, they got to want to come back. We believe they will, but we don't know for sure. You feel like Kelly would for sure, but people ask me when this ruling came down, because I was so confident about State adding Fluff. They're like, Steve, will this have any impact on Fluff if Davin Booth gets a waiver to come back? Well, at that point, Fluff had already signed, so no. And the truth of the matter is, I think Fluff is probably, if he goes through the spring and picks up the offense like we hope he does, I think he is RB1, and then maybe it's co-number ones with him and Booth. But I start thinking about that for a second. Booth's a guy you weren't expecting to have back. You get him back in your room, you add Fluff. Now all of a sudden, you start feeling like you have something. And Jeff Lebby likes to play multiple backs, wants to keep guys fresh so you can punish people over the course of a ball game. So, yes, there's room for Johnny Daniels. There's room for Seth Davis. And as I said last night, you just can't bank on Seth Davis right now. And that's not being critical of him, even though I've heard that he is on pace, 100%. He's good to go. Probably could have played some of the last games of the year, but why would you burn a year? Basically, give him the redshirt year back. But you just can't count on that. Not to mention, Fluff is a completely different back than Seth Davis. Now, all of a sudden, you don't have these cookie-cutter backs. Seth Davis is an explosive guy. Now, he may lose half a step the first year back from ACL repair, but that's an explosive guy. Davin Booth, the guy, had some explosives for us last year, but he's not going to beat Seth Davis in a foot race. And now you add Fluff, it's a thumper, not in the way Davin Booth is, and not really in the way that Kevon Lee is. And so all of a sudden, now you have a group of guys that bring some versatility. And you look at Xavier Gayton. I like the room already, but when you add Booth back into the mix, now all of a sudden you start thinking, okay, now this group went from being a group that Jeff Lebby said in the spring had to get better, and suddenly you get a guy that kind of figures it out halfway through the year. And again, we talked about it many times. You hate to lose Booth because now it appears like he's got it figured out. He knows how to make plays in the SEC, and he's gone. Well, now you have an opportunity to bring him back. And so optimism is growing. We're getting a little woolly, as we say, about this running back room that really struggled the first half of the season. Really did. And again, a lot of moving pieces, and you got an offensive line that had to kind of gel. All of that was important. But now, when you consider this ruling, really changes the complexion of your roster because you're able to bring two guys back that have a year in your system and in 4 years of college football under their belt. That's a difference-making opportunity. That is absolutely an outstanding situation for us. And, we think that it's going to be a good thing. And so still some moving parts to all this, but there is growing optimism this is all going to be taken care of. And now all of a sudden you start thinking about that's one less portal piece we got to chase, and maybe two, because you got to account for Booth in the 85 too. So now maybe you don't take two more receivers. Maybe you get Kelly back, maybe you take one receiver. And I think we need to go get a big body guy that can be an X, that can elevate. I think everything, roster management nowadays in college athletics is more difficult than ever. And now all of a sudden the NCAA has kind of thrown this little monkey into the thing. It's like all of a sudden there's a monkey wrench thrown into the transmission here because of the fact that just when everybody thought, okay, well, these guys are graduated and moving on, they're out of eligibility. Well, wait a minute. No, you got to bring those guys back. And how many schools are going to have room to absorb those guys? So again, I think that's going to be part of this second wave in the portal. There may be some guys that are veterans that are situated just like Diego and Kelly that maybe don't have room on the roster to go back. And so then they will enter the portal. Or maybe some guys you'll be like, hey, I thought my career was over, and I see these guys out here cashing in with NIL, so let me go out there and see what I can get. I'm playing with house money. That's an important aspect of this. Always important to understand. Okay, final segment of the show brought to you by the Stark Vegas Clubhouse. I love the Stark Vegas Clubhouse. I can't wait. It's about a week away from we stay there for a couple days. Excited about that. Have all the kids and the grandkids under one roof. What a joy that is going to be. We have a group text in our family. We stay in contact, and it feels like you're caught up. There's nothing like being able to hug your kids. There's nothing like being able to sit around and enjoy a meal with your kids and watch them interact. I mean, they're so lively when they're around each other. There's just something about having everybody home. And we're going to take the trip out of our home and get a place with, we got a growing family so people have more room to spread out. And so you should take advantage of that too. You should be the agent for change within your own friend group or your family and plan a big trip. The best place to stay in the Golden Triangle is a Stark Vegas Clubhouse. Now 6 bedrooms, 2 baths, that great back porch area, the full service kitchen, the wet bar, the fire pit area. It's got everything you need for a couple nights, just kind of rest and relax here in the Golden Triangle area. 5 minutes away from the Mississippi State campus. If you're coming for ball game weekends or maybe a midweek trip, taking a men's and women's game, you can do all your dining right there at home, do the cooking there, and then jump in the car, head to campus, watch ball games, and get right back and be able to just chill. If you want an adult beverage, you can do that too. You only got one neighbor out there. We don't want you throwing a rager, but you have an opportunity to really just have some peace and quiet. It's well off the road. You'll be surprised at how quaint the whole thing is. It's the old renovated country clubhouse. It is a fabulous place to stay. So if you're bringing a friend group, a family group, or perhaps a work group to town, consider doing that rather than everybody going out there finding their own accommodations. It's so great to have everybody together. And you make those cinnamon rolls on the morning, how great that is. You just feel it, you just smell all over the house, right? That's the best part of being involved with something like that, right? The Stark Vegas Clubhouse. Now, when you Google the Stark Vegas Clubhouse, some booking options are going to come up and their Facebook page. Check out the Facebook page, see all the amenities available to you and your guest, and then book a stay. You can book through Airbnb. You can book through VRBO. That's fine. But if you want to save some money, let me allow you a promo code, right? Go to the Evolve website and use promo code BSR10. That's BSR10. Get you 10% off your stay just by listening to this show. Now, you can book it through somewhere and pay full price if you want to. Maybe you've got it better than me. I like promo codes. I like saving money. I work too hard for it. So if you're looking to save some money on a great trip to Starkville, BSR10 through the Evolve website for the Stark Vegas Clubhouse. The best place to stay in the Golden Triangle. All right, let's take a few minutes here too, and we talked so much about the portal. We talked a little bit about changes and roster changes and things like that. I want to talk a little bit in the final. I had a few people reach out about kind of my soliloquy the other day about the importance of family and things like that. Here are my Christmas wishes to you, okay? And maybe we don't have 10 of them, but. So this is kind of a de facto top 10 list, but no music involved. And I think about, Christmas is gone by, right? You think about, and here's the thing that kind of hit me today. I don't remember many of the gifts that I got. I remember some, right? I remember how important some of those things were to me at the time. But the thing that I remember more so than anything else is the way that I felt. The way that I felt that my parents went to the trouble to make sure that I had a great Christmas. Every year, my dad would give me $100 outfit. That was always his big thing. So that was his thing to me. And for me, when Ani was growing up, I'd buy him new Jordans every year. I'd get my Christmas bonus, and I would immediately head to Foot Locker, and I'd buy him a brand new pair of Jordans every single year. But my dad wanted me to have a $100 outfit every year for Christmas. Every year. And it wasn't a Motley Crue shirt and some camouflage cargo pants, And the older that I get, the more I appreciate the trouble that everybody went to make my life special, right? And I think that's something that I have handed down to my own children. And one of the things I can tell you, my wife is great at a lot of things. She has never, ever, ever let those children have a Christmas that was anything less than super special. We overdo it every year for Christmas. And it's not because we're overcompensating. But this year's a little different, It's just one of those things, too. It's like we wanted things to be magical, for our children. And I see that now like in Ani's family. Like last night, they had their Christmas last night. And because they're going to be, at her family's house and going to have another Christmas there at his wife's family's house in the morning. And am I a little bit envious? Yeah, sure. But we'll get a chance to love on them next week. But and then all of a sudden my son says, "Hey, I'm fixing to go play this, outside of Vivi's door," and he plays the video, Santa landed on the roof, and all you can hear is the noise, right? Well, his wife thought, "Hey, let's go listen on the monitor and see if she heard it." Well, sure enough, they go back and play back the monitor, and she hears the sleigh bells and things like that, and then her little sweet voice says, "Santa." That is a memory that will last a lifetime, for us. Unfortunately for her, she didn't remember it this morning. But I share that with you because we have been very blessed, and there have been times in my life that I wasn't sure how we were going to pull Christmas off. And I thought, you know what, we'll do some great things, but maybe it's not going to be as grand this year. But Dana always found a way, always, whether it was picking up extra shifts, doing some PRN work, or, we just found a way to get it done. And there are some other people out there that I know that are struggling a little bit. And I've had some people that have worked for me in the past when I worked in the retail industry. We had charge accounts at our store, and they would do their Christmas shopping at the store. I worked for Holligmeyer's Furniture. Everybody had an account, and all throughout the year, around November, December, we'd carry toys and things like that, and they would order those and charge them. And every year, Christmas figured it out. They figured it out, but then they had to pay for it the rest of the year. But you do what you have to do as a parent. But I know there's some other people out there that they're not going to have much under the tree. And the thing that I would suggest to you is it's not always going to be this way. And there are some times that things happen in life that throws a bit of a curveball. And sometimes you got to find a way to make a little sacrifice. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's the kids that really suffer. But I also know from being a parent, the parent suffers right along with them, because maybe they couldn't give the kids even half of what they wanted for Christmas. And I'm not one that thinks, kids should go write a list up of 50 things and get all 50, right? You say, hey, give me a list of your 10 favorite things, and you go get them about half of it, and you get them some needful things too, but not everybody has the resources to do that. And I just want to say, as great as Christmas is, and it has always been in my family, I know there's some families out there that wish their Christmases were a little bit grander. I know kids ask you for things maybe you can't afford. But the reality of it is the effort matters. The effort, it may not matter today and in the morning. They're going to be happy with what they got, and they may be a little bit disappointed that, Santa didn't bring something they asked for. It was near the top of their list, and maybe you just couldn't pull it off, Don't beat yourself up too bad. Don't do it. Because again, when you get a little bit older as a kid and you become a parent yourself, you begin to kind of look back and say, you know what? Mom and Dad really tried hard for me. And not just at Christmas, but all year long. It's just more evident at Christmas, right? At the end of the day, I remember my grandmother. We were as broke as the 10 Commandments when I was a kid. I lived with my grandparents until I was 8. After my parents split up, and lived with my grandparents, and we didn't get much for Christmas, but what we got, they were always so excited about that. I remember one particular Christmas, I got the wind-up Evel Knievel motorcycle thing. You had the little thing, you spin, you hit the thing on top, and the Evel Knievel takes off and crashes into the refrigerator and all that kind of stuff. And I remember getting that, and I just thought that was the biggest thing ever. It was the biggest thing ever, because I thought Evel Knievel was like a superhero, And it still matters to me. My grandparents had nothing. My grandfather was a carpenter and a minister, so they never had much in the way of material things. My grandmother didn't have to work, though. My grandfather made sure of that. She stayed home, took care of the house, took care of the kids, and eventually the grandkids. But I know this, I was always loved. And I think that's one of the most important things, when you look around life, is there's a lot of kids out there that may have a lot of things, but they don't feel a connection with their families. And some of that's their fault, okay? I'm not beating up mom and dad here. But I think it's important to understand, no matter what you do, when you do it out of love, it's reciprocated. It may not be initially appreciated, but as kids begin to get older, they begin to understand the sacrifices you make. Now, I'm not saying you can go out there and live your whole life and take trips and things like that and leave them at home, and then at Christmas go out there and hand them a couple of gift cards and call it a day and call yourself a good parent. I don't think that's right. But I think what's interesting, it's been an interesting year for us. We opened a new business, and everything that we make from the business is going back into the business, right? I mean, so basically, I'm kind of a single income guy right now in that respect, because things are being good. We love for them to be great, but I'm not breaking the bank. With the float spa, we're doing well, but would love to be doing better. We've had so many people that have supported us this week. It's been crazy. It's been the busiest week ever at True Rest, but. My kids reached out to us, a couple of them, independently, like days of each other. And they said, hey, listen, if it's going to be a big deal this year for you guys, don't feel like you got to go break the bank. Mom, don't stress about this. Of course, Dana always finds a way to make things great for our children. But I think the same feelings that I have about my parents that my children are beginning to have too. Even though not all of my children have children, I think they're now old enough and mature enough to kind of understand what an undertaking Christmas can be. And so as a result, my kids are like, hey, let's go eat Chinese food together tomorrow. Mom, don't worry about cooking. I know it's been busy. You have to run in that spa every day. Let's go eat Chinese food together. We'll eat Asian somewhere in town. And then we'll sit around and watch Christmas movies, and we'll open our gifts. And that's enough for them. And that's the most important thing that I think about is that's one of the biggest signs of maturity is when you as a child begin to see your parent as a human and not necessarily an ATM, or an old Toys R Us, something like that. You see your parent as a human. And I think that's very important to understand. And I share that for that parent that maybe is listening to the show tonight or in the morning that is worried about Christmas. They're worried about disappointing their children. They're worried that what they've done is not enough. And I don't know what's going on in your life. Maybe this year just hadn't been a great year for you at the office. Maybe you've lost a job. Maybe you've gone through a divorce. Maybe there's just a lot of things going on. And in the end, the kids kind of pick up a tab on that. But I just want you to know, if you love them and you show them you love them, and that's not just buying gifts, the kids will understand. Kids are not oblivious to what's happening in your life, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. But I think it's so incredibly important that everything that we do out of love. And that's one of the things that I share with you guys. I've always known that I was loved, right, when I was by my family, always. And that's one of the things that I have always told my children. I tell all my kids how much I love them. I tell my sons how much I love them. And when Ian and I are together, even now, out in public, I say, dude, I love you. I love you. Because I'm not going to leave this world worrying about this macho bravado thing, And I think that's a good example that I've said for my sons, is that to be very open. But also, too, I was a guy that didn't get a lot of I love yous, even though that I was loved. But there's just something about hearing that, from the person that was instrumental in your upbringing to say, I love you and I'm proud of you. And so for those of you parents out there that are struggling a little bit tonight, I love you and I'm proud of you too. I know you're doing the best that you can do. And so this holiday season, let's love one another. Let's get ready for, a big year, in 2025. And maybe next year, maybe set some money aside in a Christmas club or something like that, and maybe buy gifts throughout the year. Maybe have a bigger Christmas next year. And kind of plan ahead if you can. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be about what they get. It's who they get it from, and from the heart that is giving it to them. Showing them what love can and should be. That's the most important thing. You remember that the rest of your life. Hope you guys have an amazing Christmas, and we'll see you guys on the other side. We'll talk on Friday. We'll start talking about a couple of basketball games, maybe a little bit, wrapping up some more portal stuff. But there'll be some things kind of happening around us, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But as of now, I want you all to have a great, great holiday season and focus on what matters most. And that's not going to be how many gifts are under the tree. Until next time, let's all live our lives in a way we make more friends than enemies, and people can see a difference in the way we live.